Lifestyle Pirates with Big J and Adriano.
How are you, buddy?
Good, mate. How are you?
I'm good, man. Welcome to Lifestyle Pirates.
I love it. Thanks
for coming on.
You see us okay under that hat? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. Comfortable.
Nice.
Nice Saturday attire.
Well, look, this morning we are joined by Dan Murray from Empathic Consulting. Really good to have you here. Known you for a long, long time. Love the stories that we've been able to share, and we're going to tell some good ones today. You have done an inordinate amount of webinars recently. I think you threw out a figure earlier on. It was like 35 hours worth of webinars in the last few months.
Yeah.
What have you been talking about, man?
What have we been talking about? Lots of stuff. Look, it's clearly a really challenging time for lots of people. Like, it's nuts. Work's different, life's different, relationships are different. And a lot of what I've been talking about for companies is how do we support their people through this time? You know, how do you lead through crisis? So what does leadership look like when you can't see people in the office? How do you build a relationship with people? How do you keep people motivated? A big part of what we've been talking about is some of the realities. Like, you're going to have to cut costs. There are very few businesses who are not going to have to change dramatically in their operating model. But how do you do that without destroying the rest of your business?
And culture is such a big recruitment tool used by a lot of companies, and obviously you start cutting costs, then culture, that has an effect, right?
Well, totally, and it's more than just a recruitment tool. It's a performance-driving tool, right? So I'll give you an example. Uber came out the other day, fired 3,500 people on a Zoom call in a few minutes.
Wow.
Now, you go, let's just park the fact that that's a terrible experience for those 3,500 people. Right?
They would have got a bad rating.
They're not loving it, right? They're probably they're back on taxis. But here's the bigger question. Tell me if you're an employee who didn't get fired. That you saw that happen to your friends, your peers, the people you know, right? Next minute, a Zoom call gets popped into your diary from the CEO next Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
How are you feeling between now and Friday afternoon?
Petrified.
Yeah. Totally,
it's
right?
Question your sort of your quality. Yeah.
You've got no idea. So, do I work harder, or do I drop the ball a little? Or do I, is my mind distracted by what's going on?
Big time.
Right. So, forget about recruitment. This is a productivity destroyer, right? And it's not. People feel bad for the ones that get let go. Yep, I get that, but it's not that. That's not the whole story. And then there's the media, then there's the customers. But we're driven by emotion, and these are scary, uncertain times. So, how do you cut costs without destroying your culture? How do you manage through these sorts of? How do you deal with the uncertainty? Yeah. And things like vulnerability. Leaders have been asking me, do I show vulnerability? Do I not show it? Do I pretend everything's okay? This is sort of muddy waters that we've been wading through with clients and big companies, small companies right across Australia and New Zealand.
And is there a change? Is there a change in people's desire to? So let's look at the vulnerability.
Yeah.
Would you say that people are less comfortable showing vulnerability in a bigger company than they are a smaller company? Like, does the size of the company matter?
Does the size matter? It's a question I get asked a lot. No, but I guess that what I'd say is it's not that consistent in those realms. I think naturally in big companies, sometimes people think I just got to pull it all back and put on the suit, put on the armour, on the mask or whatever. But people in small businesses do the same thing. Yeah.
Is that because they can be seen more in a small business? So in a big business, you can hide in the numbers of employees. In a small business, maybe not. Yeah,
maybe. But when you work in a big business, everyone's on show all the time.
Exposed.
So you're never really alone unless you're a solo, operator, and then all your customers see you. So I think the thing with vulnerability is people don't know what to do. And they've got all these different tracks running through their head of if I'm vulnerable, does it show that I'm weak and therefore will people be scared? And then I counter that and say, well, if you don't say anything's wrong, do you really think that your people think nothing's wrong? Well, they don't live under a rock. Yeah. This is a global pandemic. Everyone knows that there's some pretty heavy stuff going on.
People are pretty intuitive right now. I mean, there's no shortage of media out there.
Totally, right? And we all know that the government's basically propping up most businesses with wages. Okay, so we know that there's very few people who are naive enough not to pick that up. So you as a boss going, oh, everything's going to be fine, don't worry, I've got it all under control, that probably doesn't build the sense of certainty, or, you know, people don't feel comfortable with that as much as you might think. And so you've got to get this balance right.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got to say, yeah, look, it's nuts. It's okay to be vulnerable and say, oh, I am really stressed by this. I'm worried. I'm not sure what's going to happen. But what I've been talking about is you've got to follow that up with, but I think we can all, I think the best way we can get through this is we really rally together.
Yeah.
And I think if we all stick together and work hard at this, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know we'll be better off if we work together on this.
Yeah.
And that has to be their sort of, it's vulnerability with a rallying cry of actually, you know, as a leader, I'm going to help us get through it.
Yeah, definitely. You need to sort of project that you do have a plan moving forward, or, you know, that we are sort of all in it together moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, out of the blue, firing 3,500 people says anything can happen.
Yeah.
One for all, all for one. No,
Yeah.
You're all on your own. Best of luck. Let's hope that it works out for that's that sense of uncertainty is a big thing, and you know that I guess that's the underlying message I've been talking about a lot recently, which is that the thing humans hate more than anything in the world is uncertainty. So people go, "Oh, humans hate change." Not really. Like, you know, when someone wants wants a new apartment, they're not terrified about the idea of having to buy a new apartment. They're often pretty happy about it,
Yeah.
right? Or they want to update their wardrobe or whatever. They're not scared. People don't wear the same. Very few people wear the same clothes every day. They're happy to change. What they don't like is when they're not in control of it and they don't know what's going to happen. And basically, we're in a state globally now where just about no one knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So uncertainty is the thing that's really dominating. And how do you lead in an uncertain time? That's a lot of what we've been talking about.
And it's not only uncertainty in the workplace, you know, which is obviously where we spend a lot of time, but it's also in personal space. You know, how long am I working from home for? And, you know, if you're in a one-bedroom apartment with, you know, a newborn kicking around, your wife or your partner, you're sharing the same dining room table trying to make it work. Yeah, a friend of mine, he said to me the other day, he's like, I'm probably not being a very good employee at the moment. I'm probably not being a very good salesperson. I'm probably not being a very good teacher, and I'm probably not being a very good parent at the moment. And I was like, wow. And that was actually getting him down because he was balancing all of that whilst working from home. So he's dad, teacher, you know, trying to still make his numbers. He's in sales, which, let's face it, it's just a slog anyway.
Yeah.
And then he's obviously trying to live his life. And I was like,
Let's throw out a little, an idea here. One question I'd ask is, should the old baseline be the way we measure the current place we're in? Right? Should I measure whether I'm being good? Right. So he's saying I'm not being good. Should I measure that based on old world? You know, the way the world was, you know, 6 months ago, or is that just completely unfair? And
I guess that's the only thing we've got to draw on, right? We can only draw on experience and past. So subjective measuring on that.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's a good way
True.
of thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
You know, we can say, you know, people used to burn witches at the stake, and therefore we're so much better now because we don't do that. But no one celebrates the national "we don't burn witches at the stake" day. Like the baselines keep moving.
Yeah.
We need to think about how are we going based on all the possible choices I've got. You know, based on the scenario, am I doing a good job with what I can do?
Yeah.
And if I'm not feeling that, then, you know, I've been coaching a bunch of leaders on, they feel similar. Like, I'm just not doing enough. What have I got to do? And, you know, we've got to sort of get control of our emotions there. We've got to get a bit more regulation over how we're feeling and just go, okay, it's a pretty tough time. Let's just be okay with, we're not, you know, shooting the lights out, but we're doing the best we can. And if you're not doing the best you can, cool, let's do better. But I think it's a harsh criticism. It's an easy criticism and a harsh one to give yourself. He probably wouldn't give that criticism to someone he worked with who's in exactly the same position. Probably be quite kind to them, but we can sometimes be a bit heavy-handed on ourselves and that sort of stuff, right?
So with the sessions you run, how much of it is other leaders actually being in a safe space with their peers, maybe not in the same company or different industries or what have you, but let's assume they're on the same level or they're all leaders. How much of it is you facilitating conversations or actually them having the platform and the safe space to share and be vulnerable? And it's sometimes easier to be vulnerable with people you don't know, but then there's a kind of comfort that comes across where everybody's feeling the same challenges or the same pinch in some ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, look, leadership is lonely and stressful at the best of times.
With perfection expected.
Absolutely. And if you ever talk to people who've been promoted to CEO or managing director, that they feel like they've been pushed out of the rest of the world, like they've just been isolated. Because suddenly the game's changed. They're not one of the group anymore. They're, top of the heap. And that's stressful and lonely at the best of times. Right now it's tough, right? So we've been building these little mastermind groups and cohorts where we're getting groups of leaders from lots of different companies, from not-for-profits, from big corporate, from medium, small businesses, and them just describing their challenges and saying them out loud. Because there's a whole bunch of, you'll have this, right? There's a whole bunch of stresses in your life that whir away in your head that don't necessarily come out loud that often. And when you do say them, you're like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. Sometimes when you say them out loud, you go, well, that actually probably not, it's not as bad as I had imagined, or it feels like it's worse than that. And so just getting that stuff out's useful, but then having the opportunity for someone else to go, oh, well, have you thought about, or, the way I've been thinking about it is this. And it's not, this isn't out of some playbook. This isn't McKinsey strategy or those sorts of things. This is just someone else offering, an opinion and an idea and some empathy and compassion for this person, and it makes a huge difference. They feel like they've got a team again. They've got people who are supporting them again. They feel like they're not alone. So that's a big part of it. What we add into that then is some frameworks, some thinking, some models, and some challenging questions. So like a session I ran yesterday, we really got into, what's your biggest challenge? What are the beliefs that make it so hard? Why do you believe those things? What if they're not right? What if they're untrue? And what we do a lot is we have opinions and beliefs and ideas. What we don't do as much of is interrogate why we think that, right? We sort of go, well, it just is.
It's just thought-provoking, really.
And we're talking not only in the workplace here, we're talking in general. So when you start looking at beliefs and values, this is general, right?
Look, we focus a lot. These guys, these leaders, men and women, have specific problems they're working on, right? So in the workplace, so we try and ring fence it there. But this is this not immune, right? You look at most parts of your life, you have a whole bunch of beliefs. Whether they're right or wrong, you don't often ask a question. I don't know, look, here's a good example, might work. John, you grew up in a pretty traditional English household, would you say?
Yeah.
Yep. And this is very stereotypical, so I apologise, but in a traditional English household, if someone yells, that means something pretty bad's going down, right? Yelling's pretty uncommon, and it would happen when bad stuff's going down, yeah?
Yeah, normally I've done something wrong. And I get the full Jonathan rather than just John.
Cool, right. And Adriana, you grew up in a pretty traditional sort of Italian sort of household, and so yelling means people are
Talking.
awake. That's right, yeah, right?
Dinner served. People are just talking.
People are talking, they're alive, there's people in the house, more than one, and therefore there's yelling.
Yes.
So here's the question. Does yelling mean bad or not bad? Now, what will happen is if you grow up in that context where yelling means bad things, that becomes a belief you hold on to, right? And it's natural. This is how your brain works. You store this idea. Yelling is bad. Cool. Then you go to Adriano's and like over dinner, people are yelling at each other and you're sitting there going, wow,
The
this is...
street can hear us. Like genuinely, if I was walking home from school, I could hear my mum having a conversation, screaming. Yeah, that's just totally natural.
Yeah. and John's in there going, there's knives are about to be drawn, like things are going to go down here.
Someone's burned the pizza. What's happened?
Right?
Mario, what's happened?
And so it's it's similarly, Adriano could go to your house and someone starts yelling and everyone's like, oh no, bad stuff. And he's like, yeah, I'm in on this.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. You're a chump.
Yeah, no, it's fair. It's fair.
Right, so the environment, the interactions, the stimulus, the stuff that's coming from the outside world into us is exactly the same.
Yeah.
The interpretation of it is based on the way we see the world, our thoughts, our beliefs, and that completely transforms our experience. And so we sort of think when we're in a room and they're experiencing stuff, we sort of think that everyone's experiencing what we're experiencing. Completely untrue.
Yeah.
Everyone's having a very unique experience, often lots of shared pieces, but a fairly unique experience because their brain's constructing it based on how it's taking information.
That was that example that you give where, how the common sort of expression is walking in someone's shoes is empathy, right? But then you sort of change that completely because...
Poo-poo it, don't I?
Yeah, and it really makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you want to go into that?
Yeah. So, it is a common thing to say walking in someone else's shoes, and it's not a terrible analogy.
Yeah.
It's not a terrible thing to say. The difference is my experience in your shoes will be different to your experience in your shoes. And my view is if you want to have empathy, the only thing that matters is what's your experience. I want to understand your experience.
Different shoe size.
Yeah, well, but if I'm, I did a maths degree, which is horribly boring. But if I help someone, if I see someone struggling with maths, right, and I go, oh, well, it's easy. Let me walk in your shoes and I'll do the equation. It's a piece of cake. That doesn't help them or me understand the situation at all, right?
Yeah.
I need to understand what's it feel like for them grappling with this. What are they struggling with? What don't they understand? What are they missing? What are the challenges and complexities? I might not have any of those, but it's not about me. Empathy is about understanding them, right?
Yeah.
So it's being able to separate and look in leadership, in sales. These things are really important. Like salespeople, some of them get this wrong all the time because they use language, they use analogies, they use three-letter acronyms that the customer has no idea what they mean.
Jargon as well, industry jargon. Just got to get rid of all of that stuff.
I want to do, here's a call out to any financial advisors who want to have a little game with me. I want to do this experiment with them. So what I want to do is get them to voice record a conversation they have with their clients. And then I want to take it away and get it transcribed. And just take out all the things that the client said, just all the things that the advisor said. And then at a later date, give it to the client and say, can you just, with this black marker, cross out anything you don't understand here? Read through it, and anything you don't understand, anything that doesn't make sense, anything that's not intuitive, just cross it out with a black marker. And let's see what, like I'm suspecting it's going to look like a CIA document, like redacted down, right? But that's not the fault necessarily of the advisor. It's just a lack of awareness. They just don't realise. And lots of clients, hear the jargon and go, oh, yeah. I don't want to feel like an idiot.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
I'm just going to nod.
Yeah, I'm paying you to educate me, even though I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, and there's a big gap between appearing clever and building confidence, and building education and understanding. And so we need to work out how to close that gap. The jargon's fast, but if it's not delivering the understanding, then it's meaningless.
Well, that was like, I think one of Richard Branson's kind of not famous meme, but one of his things where if you can describe it to your mum or your nan, what you do, then it's a good idea, and it's clear and simple.
Absolutely. Mark Twain famously wrote, I'm pretty sure it was him, something along the lines of, sorry for writing you a long letter. I didn't have the time to write a short one. And the idea here is it's very much harder to
Get your point.
condense things and be, pithy and deliver things in ways that people really understand. It takes work.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to understand your audience. You have to understand what their world's like. You have to put it into their terms. You've got to, use analogies, and it's a sort of like metaphors are a great example. I do a lot of work with people on how do you build a metaphor to talk about what you're trying to talk about. And, in my work, it's a lot of the presentations I do, you'll know there's stories and little analogies, and the analogy brings to life a concept that you could describe very scientifically or academically, but the story means that everyone can go, oh yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Makes
It's
sense.
connection, yeah.
Yeah.
Storytelling's become very big in sales as well, and in content and
I'm
things,
glad that sales is catching up. Storytelling's been around for a few thousand years.
Walt Disney's been doing it for a while, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, and it's funny, now they make a big thing out of it. It's been there forever. If you were good in sales, that was one way to, when you're selling something, you basically tell the customer the same thing 3 times. And one of those was a story or a case study, putting it into practice, theory. But now they've put another label on it. So
Yeah, and look, there's a guy, a man I admire a lot, a guy named Matt Church, who talks about being able to explain things in left brain, right brain. So what's the case study? What's the numbers? What's the data? What's the process for your left brain analytical people? Then what's the metaphor? What's the story? What are the emotions that bring it together for the right brain? And being able to flex across these based on who you work. Like if you're sitting with someone and they're highly analytical and they want to have the graphs, then have the graphs. But if they're not, then forget the graphs.
have the story to go.
Yeah. So being flexible there, being able to understand what the other person wants and needs. Like, real estate's a good example of this. Chatting yesterday to an agent, and I said, "Have you ever had someone who says you do the survey? So what are you looking for in a house? Oh, we want 4 bedrooms, we want 2 bathrooms. It needs to be this much, this many square meters." And they give all these facts, right? All this stats, and they put it into a little spreadsheet. And then the person buys like a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in Balmain that's got no backyard at all. And the agent's like, what's going on? And my answer was, you didn't understand what they really wanted.
Yeah.
You asked the wrong questions. There was something about that house that actually really connected with them. And as we were chatting, he was saying, I actually had that exact example where I had a couple who wanted an apartment. And then when I got to know them better, they had 2 dogs and they loved their dogs. And so we spent the same money. Instead of going eastern suburbs apartment, we went Balmain, terrace. They had a little yard and they loved it because the dogs are actually a really big fundamental part of their life, which doesn't really go into the spreadsheets all the time, right?
Yeah,
But that's also tough in this example from the real estate agent, because if you don't know those questions to ask, you can't ask them.
Yeah. Well, whose responsibility is it though? Yeah. If you're my view, if you're the salesperson, it's not the customer's responsibility to turn up and say, these are all the things and this is what really drives me.
But there's an element of you can only work with what you're given. And whilst you can ask those questions, if I guess, and again, in this example, if they've said, right, we want an apartment, 2-bedroom, then there's your leading indicators of what they're looking for and the problem that you can then solve.
The thing is, which indicators do you fascinate about? So I talk about this a lot. There's tangible stuff in business, right? So there's numbers and metrics and rules and systems. There's all the stuff, the inventory, all the stuff you can touch. And because you can measure it, we tend to get a huge amount of feedback on it. You ask a business owner, how often do you get feedback on the profitability, your revenue, sales, all of those tangible things? Oh, you got spreadsheets like daily, right?
Yeah.
So I've got all this data and information at my hands to understand that aspect of my world, the tangible world.
Yeah.
But it's not the whole world, is it?
No.
I had this argument with a guy. He said, if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter. And I said, really? Do you love your wife? And he said, yeah, of course I do. I said, well, do you measure it? Is there a graph somewhere? Show me the chart. and let's say you got
a great answer.
Well, let's say you got a number. Well, look, John and Teresa, their relationship's an 87. Like, what? Do I understand anything about that relationship now?
I didn't do the washing up this morning. That's probably why, isn't it?
It's, yeah. Made it down. But, it doesn't tell me about your relationship is full of complexity and it's abstract and it's, that complexity is really important. And as soon as you try and turn it into a number, it loses all meaning. Right? And so you've got this whole part of the world, this intangible part of the world of relationships and values and culture and emotion that doesn't play well with numbers. It's not very easy to metricate. And so in business, you can go, all right, well, let's just ignore that because we can't measure it, which is like ignoring half the world and a pretty important half. Or you say, well, maybe that does matter and we need to be able to flex across those two worlds. I'm not saying that the numbers don't matter. Right? You'll go broke if you don't manage the numbers, but you need to manage both.
Yeah.
It's got to be both, right? So a lot of my work is helping people who are very good in the numbers to sort of explore and navigate through this intangible world. So what does it mean? Okay, I'm not very good at it. How do I start? Why is it, how does this all work? Is a lot of the sort of stuff that I help with in there.
And so is there, it's funny, I'm trying to put a framework into what you've just said, which is what you can't. Like, where would you start in that journey? I mean, do you start with culture? Do you start with the person, their kind of personal beliefs, values, their story? Where would you...
Yeah.
I
tend to start by pushing individuals to look inside first and understand what really drives them.
Which is the vulnerable piece we spoke about earlier.
A bit about the vulnerable piece, but also what are your preferences? What's your style? What do you usually rely on? How do you deal with challenges and why do you do it that way? Why do you believe what you believe? Like, why is that an important thing for you? People who have this, a really easy example that I know has caused a lot of stress for these people recently. There are a lot of people who believe if you're not at your desk, you're not doing work. Yeah? Very common in lots of industries. If people aren't in the office, then they're probably not working. And now they're all at home and these sorts of leaders are losing their minds because they can't, know if they're at their... Well, they couldn't monitor anyway. That was a false sense of security. But they're struggling with this. And I would go, so why is that? Why do you hold that belief? Is it because you don't work when you're not at your desk? And that's okay. But can we find people who do? And how do you know if they're doing that work? And what do they do well? And where do they struggle? And then how do you work with the rest of your people so they can learn from those people? Because they're not going to learn from you. If you're stuck in this world of I can only work at my desk, you're not going to be able to help them. To get out of your world. Expand upon your beliefs and start to understand what's really going on. And that's where we start with this journey, right? You've got to be good in emotional intelligence and empathy, you've got to be able to let go of all these things that you think are really important.
Yeah.
Because they aren't always.
And we tend to also treat people how we believe we would do things. So we tend to look at ourselves with a different... We would look at ourselves with an angel, with angel wings. We are the poster child of an employee, but then we look at other people in a very different way.
Diversity is a lot harder than we think. And when you think about it, this doesn't, again, might be controversial. Who cares? Your brain has not really changed much in shape, structure, or processing for thousands of years. Most scientists are pretty confident that the brain hasn't evolved much in 5,000 to 10,000 years. So let's just take that window of time. For most of that 5,000 to 10,000 years, humans lived in small tribes.
Yep.
You were born into a group of people who looked like you, sang your songs, danced your dances, ate your food. Like, it was very homogenous. And you had to get good at understanding those people, and the others, well, they weren't so important.
Yeah.
If you're someone in continental Europe, someone in Eastern Asia, didn't matter. They weren't important. It's not to say they're not important people, but they had almost no impact on your life.
Yeah.
Within a really tiny window of time, like the last 100 years, even 50 years, maybe you could even argue since the internet, suddenly we've had a massive influx of huge numbers of diverse people that we have to interact with constantly.
Yeah.
And that's that's a challenge that we struggle with, right? It's easy for us. We like people who are like us. We gravitate to people who are like us because they share those mental models, and everything can move really smoothly. We don't live there anymore. Things are tougher now.
Yeah, it's a smaller place.
You tell a good story, and I'm going to let you tell it, but about the catching the train.
Yeah. In Thailand.
Yeah, and just how different
no,
cultures
I
and
know what
people's
you mean, yeah.
perceptions.
Yeah. Like again.
That's kind of what you're going. What we will.
Yeah. Like so, we build these mental models. The thing I often use, talk about on stage, is imagine a guy named Barry. Right now,
Everyone knows a Barry.
everyone knows a Barry,
know a few
and if your
Barrys.
name's Barry, I'm not suggesting this is you, but there's a guy named Barry, and Barry's an asshole, right? Terrible human being, not a nice person. Grew up in a really isolated, little country town or something, and wasn't very well liked. He moves to the city, moves to somewhere like Sydney, starts catching the train. Now he notices that when you get the train in Sydney, you don't line up to get on, but you sort of just shuffle your way on after the person in front of you. Right, so Barry's there one day and he sees something that catches his attention. A person he thinks looks like an Indian person walks up to the edge of the train and just sort of scoots along and slides their way into the carriage at the same time as other people. Now Barry goes, oh, that's rude. So he basically, think of it, he pulls out this little mental model, this little card out of his head. And on that card it says Indian people at the top, and there's nothing on there. He doesn't know anything about Indian people, very much at all. And he writes on there, rude at getting on the train. Right? You can see how he does that. And then he files that away, but you know what happens when something gets brought to your attention, it's front of mind now.
Yeah, of course.
It's like when you go to buy a new car and you
You
pick
see
something
'em
unique
everywhere.
and they're everywhere. You're
Yeah.
like, oh. It's your reticular activating system, I think, is at play. Anyway, so he's looking for it. He goes to the train station again, sees this action again. You can see he reinforces this belief really quickly. His idea is that the Indian people are rude at getting on the train. And the issues here are simple. One, if you ask that person, are they rude at getting on the train? They'll go, well, no, I was just getting on the train. Two, if you took Barry to Mumbai and put him on a platform, he ain't going to get on a train anytime soon, is he?
Exactly.
He's going to stand back and wait for the rest of his life. The reality is that
subjective.
these subjective beliefs shape how we experience the world, and our brains like to try and tell us that they're truth, that they're objective facts. Your brain loves that, and it goes back to this idea of uncertainty and certainty. Humans love certainty. So if your brain can write down, these are facts, these are indisputable realities, and your brain goes, good job you, excellent. We know how to navigate the world with certainty. But they're just not.
No.
And, when you think they're facts, you think, well, everyone else should share them, and therefore it's easy for me to judge someone's behaviour based on my beliefs and determine it to be good, bad or indifferent. But we forget that they don't see that they're living in a different world with different beliefs. And empathy is our ability to start to bridge that gap. Okay, why did they do what they did? I saw what they did, but why did they do it? What are the drivers?
Yeah.
Why do people hoard toilet paper?
It's a good question.
Well, and I literally asked this of audiences recently online, and they're like, well, stupidity, greed, fear, and
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty. I often let it go, but there's lots of reasons. There's
Sheeple.
well, you need it, right? It's a resource that you need. It's not like you can go, all right, I'm just going to quit doing that stuff for 6 months and everything should be fine. It's a resource that isn't easily substituted, right? I don't know if you ever grew up without
Do you not
toilet
have
paper.
a bidet?
we,
Am I the only one here that had a bidet growing up?
Yeah, I'd say so. But, it's not easy to substitute. It's not like you can go, I'll just start using magazines and newspaper for a while. That's not too comfortable. You can't reuse it very well. Like, it's not like you can go, we'll just make this toilet roll last for another few months. So there's some logical
But it
rational
sort of
reasons.
spreads socially as well. It was
Absolutely.
like, well, if he's doing it, what does he know that I don't know? I'm going to get some crap paper.
Totally.
Like I need to get as much as I can get because seriously, something must be happening right now.
And that's the exact attitude that breaks banks, right? When there's a run on a bank, and I don't know if you've ever read up on these, but when people think that the bank might collapse, everyone goes to get their money out.
Yeah.
little hint: the banks don't have enough money to give everyone their money back.
Yeah.
That's not how banks work. And so if everyone pulls their money out, the bank collapses, and what happens is the people who haven't got their money out, they lose their money.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like that. But there's also some cultural things that I think we should use this time to interrogate. Why did that happen in Sydney, for example? Here's my suggestion, and I'd get your thoughts on it. I reckon Sydney and Australia, in large part the capital cities, is pretty individualistic culture. Like, look after ourselves. We're not particularly if someone shares and does something nice for someone, it makes the news.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, wow, that's a saint. Yeah.
Like, it's somewhere like I've been through the slums of Mumbai. They don't live without sharing.
Yeah.
No one survives.
Yeah.
You know, their idea is that toilets are a shared commodity in large part.
Yeah.
Water's a shared commodity. Safety and security is a shared commodity. We've got, you fly over Sydney, half the people have got their own pools that don't get swum in. Like, that's a really dumb use of resources when you think of it collectively. Let's just have one pool. But
Well, you can't do that anymore, COVID.
no, you can't. But that individualism means that you get this sense of I have to look after myself and my family, and so I'm going to get that toilet paper, and I don't care if someone else misses out. It's not about them; it's about me, which is a different cultural aspect into this mix. So there's a lot more going on than just one reason why these things happen. Right?
But I agree with you with that about Sydney as well. We are very sort of individual.
Yeah, yeah.
I think this has given us a period of time to stop and reflect on that, though. And I think it's funny, like the small gestures, because of where we're at, have had so much more of an impact. Like that chap that gave everyone $100, he got out 10 grand from the ATM. That's probably on the other continuum. But the fact he's done that, a very selfless act, massive. The superstores, Coles and Woolies opening up an hour early for the more seniors. Those little gestures, I think, I kind of hope we can continue to make examples out of them, because I think it does, regardless of what pandemic you're in or what situation we're in, it does stop and remind us and go, hang on a minute, this is special only because it's not the norm. How do we make this more regular?
How do we
get
make
this
it normal?
exactly?
And
How do we pay it forward?
Totally.
I've done it a few times. The person next to me, when I grabbed a coffee, I'm like, mate, what do you want? And the look on their face is just one of like fear. And normally I'm rocking like a salmon blazer with a pocket square.
Of course you are.
I'm not the aggressive guy, but I'm like, mate, what do you want? And I'll buy him a coffee. And I said, mate, just buy the next person next to you a coffee. Just trying to get some sort of momentum to pay stuff forward.
Do you really do that?
I've done it twice.
In a salmon blazer.
That's great.
Done it twice in my salmon blazer.
He's worn that blazer twice.
Yeah. But it's just those little things. We shouldn't be making a big deal out of it. That should just be being the norm.
Yeah.
The last chat we had on the podcast, Joel, we were talking about it's given everybody a bit of an ability to slow down and think about others, not just me, myself, and I, or the family. It's how are my friends doing? How are my family doing? Especially with those with family overseas that perhaps got parents that my mum has been in her house for 5 weeks. She's in her 70s. She's not allowed to go anywhere. She's probably one of the most social people I know. How's she doing? So I think it has given people that ability to stop, slow down, and think about outside themselves. And I hope that continues.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, it's really interesting because the sort of kindness that we really think's amazing is normal in many places.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. So a few years ago, I was doing a charity bike ride through the northeast of Thailand, and the northeast of Thailand is a very poor area. They see very few Westerners. It's largely rural, small families, and not a lot of funding or money in that sort of area for a whole bunch of reasons. Anyway, we were doing this charity bike ride, and we'd sort of gotten a bit separated from the group, and the guide was in the car, said, let's just wait here for a second. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and I'm a bit of a middle-aged man in Lycra, right? So I had full Lycra on, had the bike, the helmet, the specialised helmet, the Oakley Sunnies, all the gear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Built for speed.
Totally.
and comfort.
I looked like a sausage that had been overstuffed, but let's move on.
What a vision.
Yeah. So anyway, so I've pulled up on the side of the road, and I look across, and there's a little like barbed wirey fence that's falling apart, and then a sala. So just a slab of concrete with 4 poles and a little hut over the top, all open.
What do you call it? A sala.
Sala. That's what they would call it, a little sala. And so under that little hut was on a little grass mat sort of thing, a rolled out mat, was a family eating their breakfast. So mum, dad, 3 kids. There's mostly dirt, and they had a little tiny shack that obviously was their house right next to it, and they were sitting there. And they saw me pull up, and they waved and said, "Oh, King Cow," and then sort of waved their hand towards me. King Cow means eat food.
Oh, wow.
Come and eat. Come and share some of our food. They had some rice and some fish and stuff on the ground on the plates, and their first suggestion to what would have looked like a goddamn alien had just dropped in from outer space on their doorstep. Their first reaction is, "Come eat."
Wow.
Now you you park in front of someone's house, and they don't know who your car is. They shut the door, they lock the door, they double blow the US, the guns coming out. Like, this is where they have the complete opposite reaction. They're like, "Well, welcome."
Wow.
My helmet's worth more than their house, and their first reaction is, "Come and eat some of our food." And so
you
this is what
indulge?
I'm.
Did you have some?
Yeah.
I didn't. The guide actually, she jumped through their fence, sat down with them, had a chat. I couldn't speak. I speak very little Thai, and I don't speak Isan, which is the language they speak.
Did she
up
kind
there.
of say, "Hey, he doesn't need any. He's good"?
That's right. He clearly needs to do more riding and do some laps. No, but, that's an example that I sort of reflect on and go, we're a long way from best practice in being kind to each other and supporting each other, even though we have way more resources.
Yeah.
And you could argue maybe the reason we've got so many resources is because we're greedy, or there's a whole, it's really complicated when you get in that space, right? But I hope this is a time where we actually go, we need to change some stuff.
That's all virtue signaling.
Yeah.
So on that, obviously, your work aside, in terms of what you do, have you changed? Have you made any little adjustments for the, let's just call it the greater good? Have you done anything that Dan and family wouldn't ordinarily do to maybe bring us a step or half a step closer to your oasis, as it were?
Yeah, look, it's we've sort of supported one particular charity for 12 years or so now.
This is Hands Across the
Hands
Water.
Across the Water.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so Hands Across the Water was started 2006 after the Boxing Day tsunami by a good friend of mine, Peter Baines, a lovely man, and he was a forensic detective for the police after the tsunami. He was doing body ID in Thailand for months and months. Saw a need to help out some kids who'd sort of lost everything, and he decided to build them a home, and that sort of flowed on, and now he's raised over $25 million. There's 7, more now, properties across Thailand with kids who are otherwise would be abandoned and orphaned, and they support those ongoing, and we're proud to be part of that in some small way, and that's sort of a big part of our focus. But I think sometimes we think that kindness has to be some big grand gesture, when actually I think it can be really small things. It can be asking people how they go. I had a client who said to me yesterday in an email, "Yeah, but that's all good. I'd sent him a contract or something. He said, that's all good. I've just had a shit of a week." Oh. And so my first thought is, well, I better, check out, you're right. Do you want to chat? Can I help in any way? I was finishing up a webinar, one of our leadership mastermind groups, and the last person on the screen, just before the Zoom, just before I pressed end meeting, just went, oh. And so as soon as the Zoom, I already pressed end, I called up and said, "You're right. What's going on?" And I heard a little sigh. I just wanted to check in. And those are the things we've got to do more of now, because you don't see people. One of the tips I often give leaders is to work out whether people are okay or not. Look how they walk into and out of a meeting room. In the meeting, they can put on a good mask and everything can seem fine. But if they're struggling, they'll slump on the way in or out. As that the weight of they bring the weight of this bloody, I'm just struggling a bit. They'll often bring that in. They'll sit down, then they'll pep up and they'll put their mask on and they're fine. And then as they leave, you'll often see them sort of have that. And they're the people I often say, go and just check in with those people first.
That's a great tip.
Because some people will air their laundry, right? Some people in the meeting use that time to get the stuff off their chest.
Yep.
You've heard them. Just look for the ones that aren't able to do it in that forum and look for signs, right? And so the challenge now is Zoom, there's no walk-in, walk-outs. Yeah. You don't press camera until you're on.
You heard that side, though.
And
you still picked
You've
up
got
on
to
it.
look out. You've got to be looking for this stuff and asking about it,
And how do you finish a meeting on Zoom? I mean, I've done so many kind of
all right,
see ya,
okay,
bye.
bye.
I feel like I'm waving goodbye to my nan.
I do a fade out.
Oh, no.
It's thoughtfulness that we need more of, right?
Yeah.
It's not, as soon as it becomes formulaic, as soon as it is contrived that, now you buy the coffee for the person.
No.
Then it's sort of, you shouldn't be overly contrived, and there's a challenge in that. But there is opportunity to help people, right? And it can be just stuff like this. You guys, building this sort of stuff, sharing information, supporting people who are doing the right. We started getting boxes of fruit and veg from some farmer websites.
Yep.
And look, the fruit and veg probably is the stuff that Coles and Woolies reject because it doesn't look perfect.
Yeah.
It tastes awesome. We're happy with it. It's, well priced. Those decisions you make shape economies, right? We sort of forget that. The reason why we've gotten to people go, oh, there's the monopolies of the big two shopping, the big two supermarkets. Well, that's because you keep going. You don't turn up, they don't exist. And there's choice. And then people go, oh, well, it's not my fault. Well, you've got to, you make the choice.
Yeah.
So change or stop complaining. We've got to be a bit harsh on that sort of stuff sometimes. But the choice is, why do we do what we do?
Yeah.
And, interrogating that more, I think, is useful.
So can I ask, because you've come out of big corporate, you were with the big four banks, you were with an insurance firm as well. When did Empathic Dan start? What triggered that?
Long, slow burn. So it's sort of I think a growing frustration. A lot of my work was in sort of a management consulting role internally. So I'd work alongside people who'd been in McKinsey's and BCG and all the big management consulting firms. And, it was good work. It's complex problem solving, basically. We get thrown into the deep end of, we need to save $130 million. Work it out. We get thrown into the deep end of complex policy problems, and we've just got to work stuff out. So I love that. What I saw, though, was a couple of things. One, a number of my colleagues, particularly who'd come out of big consulting firms, say things like, oh, these clients are idiots. And, they'd sort of treat them with this, they need us because they can't solve these themselves, and this sort of arrogance about it. And that, for me, really destroyed trust and relationship and meant that we were sort of hiding stuff from each other as in the projects, and that sort of eked away at me. I then saw that we'd put a lot of really cool PowerPoint packs together, and if you work with consultants, they really love a good PowerPoint deck, right? And graphs and slides.
Who doesn't? Sound effects and everything.
Totally.
Transitions.
Charts and arrows and chevrons and all the good stuff, right?
Yeah.
But we do all of that, and when we go back to that tangible, intangible stuff, it's all tangible stuff, no intangible stuff, right? The number of times I had to work with spreadsheets that at the top of a column said FTE. And these are humans, right? And we're calling them, that person's a 0.67, you're a 1, you're a 1.
So what does FTE mean for people that have not heard that before?
Full-time equivalent. So, if you work part-time, you work 3 days a week, you're a 0.67. These are humans, and we value them by the number of days they turn up. And that was it. Then you do a big spreadsheet and you work out, okay, we need to cut this many people. And we're missing that whole intangible space. You know, there's a big gap between wanting to do the work and not wanting to do the work in performance and productivity. We ignored it. We went, well, they're just numbers, right? And so that frustrated me, and it also it kept breaking. We kept missing stuff. People did terrible things, made bad decisions, and we never were sort of on top of it.
And was that a hard transition for you, being big corporate? You mentioned you had a maths degree, which is, I mean, you got to love numbers, right?
boring,
and
right?
then to get into this, you know, quote unquote warm and fuzzy world, right?
Yeah.
The intangible. Was that hard for you personally? Was that growth?
It was critical because I was terrible at it.
Yeah, right.
I'd been perfecting the art of not caring about it for most of my career.
Yeah.
You know, and so it was a point, I guess, of me going, okay, I'm missing something. I'm not good at this stuff. I better work out how to do it.
Yeah.
I better sort of understand that I've got limitations and this is going to hold me back constantly. Or I can keep playing this fake game. I can stay in this big world and keep playing this fake game, and you can be good at it and make lots of money, but that wasn't going to work for me. So I thought, okay, in the charity space, in lots of other parts of, you know, working with not-for-profits, in the arts, there's so much power in this intangible world. If I could work out how to get my head around it, put some structure around it, and then help other people like me play in this space and bring that into big corporate, bring that into business world, man, it'd be a better place, wouldn't it? Wouldn't things be better off?
Absolutely.
You know, and I've worked with, I ran a not-for-profit or a charitable foundation for a number of years. One of the challenges in the not-for-profit sector is that they just don't have the resources, and that's a really long conversation as to why and why it shouldn't be, but it is. And, you know, one of the things that I do buy into is that one of the most powerful ways we can change the world is by getting the organisations who have pooled up all the resources to change what they do. Right? If you want to have an influence in Australia, CBA is going to have a much bigger influence if they can do what they do well versus any of the big charities. And it's a sad reality, I think. I don't think it should be the case, but let's face into it. They've got way more money, way more influence, way more resources, and they have a big impact on the society that we live in. So let's help them get better. And that became my mission, if you like. How can I help them play in this world, do it more effectively, have better performance, make more money, but do it in a way that is better for their people and their customers, and therefore better for all of us. And as I said, it's slow burn. It sort of grew over years. Just after my daughter was born, I thought, let's take the plunge. And you know, my main focus to start with was building and trying to get those frameworks and tools and take all of that psychology and neuroscience and behavioural economics, all this stuff that's really useful, but it's not written for business people. And how do I turn that into stuff that people like me can go, oh, there you go, I get that. That makes sense. And once I got to that place, then using stages like conferences and storytelling to be able to share that message, and you just see the little light bulbs. People go, all right, oh yeah, okay, I can do that. That's not just motherhood statements, or it's not just warm and fluffy. That makes sense. Okay, I can probably play this game. And opening that door for people was the sort of the point where I went, okay, there's definitely something in this. We're onto something here, and sort of really doubled down on that as a career path.
Very cool.
Yeah, and look, it's trying to help people who most people that I work with are good people. There's very few that are just narcissistic, like money's everything, run over their grandmother if they had to. There's very, very few people like that. Most people I work with go, I know I should be better at this stuff. I'm just not good at it. And so I don't know where to start. And so I just stuff it up. Yeah. Yeah. And most people want to be better. Some of them go, yeah, but we've got to make money. And that's where I go, cool, let me show you how this does that more effectively than what you're doing now. We're not taking the money away. We're going to make you more successful, more build performance. But here's the levers you're ignoring, that if we pull these levers and do these well, you're going to get that better outcome. Yeah. And that's sort of that's what I do. It's interesting. It's fun. I love the thinking. I love the research. You know, I've been looking at neuroeconomics and brain tests and psychology, and there's a whole bunch of interesting stuff there.
I've never heard the term neuroeconomics. What is that?
So it's basically, it looks at how your brain makes decisions. And there's a whole bunch of really confronting research on how much free will and decision-making you actually have versus the things that are just automatic. We always sort of feel like we're in control of our decisions, and that's actually, a lot of research suggests that that's a myth. You're not. You're good at making up a story to suggest that you were.
Convincing yourself, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're not as good at a lot of decisions are made in very interesting ways through when you study the brain and how the brain's actually working. So I'm not in control of getting up in the morning and getting a coffee and peanut butter on toast. Okay, let's try and bridge the gap slowly.
Yeah.
Do you sweat?
Yeah.
When you exercise? Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about the time when you went, oh, gee, I'm getting hot, I better start sweating now. And then you started sweating. Tell me about that. Never happened, did it?
No,
it just happens. Like you just start sweating.
Yeah.
And you should be thankful. Like if you had to think about it.
Well, I always think as well, I always know if I've had a good workout because I have sweated. If I haven't, then I'm like, I don't feel like I've done anything.
Yeah, right. And none of that, though, is... So, like, there's research on the amount of signal that goes to your brain. So your brain can't see. It's a big chunk of fatty material, neurons that sit inside your skull. It gets... think of all these pipes of information that are going into it from all these different parts of your body. Eyes, ears, nose, every nerve ending is constantly sending a signal. Right, so there's at the moment on your wrist there's a nerve ending that's sending a signal to your brain saying there's something touching me, which is your watch. Your brain is ignoring that, particularly your conscious brain is completely ignoring it. Otherwise, that's why you don't feel... Like you don't feel like you're wearing clothes unless you go, I am, okay. You ignore those signals. So of the signals, 11 million bits of data go into your brain every second.
Just for the people listening on the podcast, we are all fully clothed.
All wearing clothes.
You can look it on YouTube. It's being filmed, but we are all fully clothed.
You don't tell your heart to beat.
You don't tell your heart to beat. So 11 million signals go into your brain every second. What we can measure, or what they have done lots of research on, is how many of those signals does your conscious brain attend to? I want to give a guess out of 11 million?
Less than 1%.
3.
40. 40.
I was way off.
40 signals.
40 bits of data a second is what what we believe the conscious mind is processing. 40.
Out of how much?
11 million
many,
bits.
sorry?
A second.
A second. So you don't... This is where it gets really tough, right? So you eat something.
Yeah.
You think of all the stuff that has to go on. Your body's got to saliva,
Senses, yeah.
it's got to start the acids in your stomach, it's got to prepare, starts pushing food. There's all these sorts of things that have to go on. You don't attend to any of that. No. All automatic. So why do you think you're so in control of all these other things? A lot of it is because we want to feel like we are, because it gives us certainty, and we love certainty. We hate uncertainty. We're back to this space, right?
Yeah.
But you don't attend to that much of that stuff.
That's why I love talking to the guy.
And again, even when you do choose something, what drove that choice? Well, some of it's emotion, some of it's subconscious. Again, I use this quite often. Let's say you're on your couch, you're watching, sitting on the couch, you got your popcorn, you're watching some scary movie.
Yeah.
A guy jumps out with an axe. What do you do?
Jump scares.
Just think about how dumb that is. You're on your couch. You're watching a television. It can't hurt you. The most dangerous thing in the room is popcorn.
Yeah.
It's a choking hazard that is real, and you're just stuffing that in as fast as you can, right?
You see me eat popcorn.
Salted or sweet?
Buttered.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
for
butter.
sure. It's got to be
Yeah,
buttered.
okay. I'm just checking. Just went
But so again, your reaction to be fear to feel fear is not conscious.
So why does that? Why do out of that kind of those 40 bits of
Things we
data?
can attend to, yeah.
Why does it focus on the scary bit of the film and not?
That's immersion, though.
Well, I'm
Movies are
gonna-
made like that.
Well, yeah. We make that because people have the reaction, but what I'm suggesting there is it's not one of the 40.
Right.
So what we don't know is how much of those 11 million your subconscious brain is processing and working on.
Right. Okay.
Right, so your subconscious brain, not what you think about consciously, your subconscious is always on, always firing. It sends signals. Your fear is your subconscious going, wake up, there's something going on to your conscious brain, right? And then your conscious brain's like, whoa,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, guy with an axe, okay, I'm onto it. But we're safe, so relax.
Yeah.
So think about these two people like in your head.
Yeah.
One of them's conscious, gets almost no information about what's going on in the world. Seems like he's in total control.
It's almost like the
one's-
cartoons, isn't it? You get the bad guy, the bad subconscious, and the good subconscious sitting on the shoulders.
Totally right, and so why you choose to wear a certain set of clothes,
Salmon jackets.
salmon jacket, right?
Not born to blend in.
But a lot of that will be your subconscious. It'll be emotional input from a whole bunch of subconscious processes that you've got no access to. When you put it on and someone says, why are you wearing that? Your subconscious cannot put together a story. It has no access to language. It can't tell you what's going on. Your conscious brain goes, well, that's not very good. Let's make something up. And you'll generate a story. I really like that colour. It goes in my eyes. Once my mum said that really looks good.
Not born to blend in.
Yeah, so you'll find a reason, but doesn't mean it's the reason. It's not saying it's not the reason, but it doesn't mean it is the reason. You just get great comfort from going, but I chose that. Well done, me. Because my mum said it, brings out my eyes, right? So
She didn't say it. She does like it, though, in all fairness.
I like it. It's fine.
Thanks, mate. Wow, that's just mind blowing.
And so we get
Far
back to
out.
our salespeople.
Yeah.
Like, this is why it's so hard. You're trying to work out not what they tell you, but what's going on that they don't even necessarily know what's going on sometimes.
Yeah.
So expect this to be hard. This is not an easy place to play. But welcome to being a human. It's a tough gig.
Can you, with what you do you ever? You're obviously getting you're reading a lot. You're getting light bulb moments yourself from research that you do, from papers that you write. Do you ever see when you're speaking to the room, someone go? Do you know what I mean? Do you ever see that
Yeah.
moment where they go, actually, that story you've told, or that picture you've done, or when you bring it all together, they go, my God, that now I get it.
Yeah. And that's the
And do they tell you?
yeah, sometimes.
Nice.
You see it in their eyes sometimes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people come and go, oh, that was amazing. And they're still working through all that stuff.
Yeah, unpacking.
And the reason I use a lot of stories is because humans retain stories much more effectively than we do facts. We're born to, our brains are designed to remember stories and patterns and sequences. You know, I used to love rap music when I was in high school.
You still love it.
Still love it.
It's
but,
okay.
Like when a 90s rap tune comes on, I know all the words.
Oh, yeah.
Same.
Right?
We're not going to start singing Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but I'm pretty sure we could do
Totally.
that.
But that's amazing given that like other sequences of facts, you just go, no idea.
Yeah.
There's a lot of words in some of those things, right? But we're good at remembering patterns. We're good at remembering stories, things that have emotion to us, things that we feel emotion with.
Yeah.
We store those in memory well.
I was always really good at remembering lines from movies,
Mm-hmm.
you know, The Simpsons, Friends, some films, like literally verbatim,
Yeah.
quote for quote, or even full paragraphs and stuff. Always really good at that.
Yeah, and it's your level of engagement when you're listening. It's the way it's put together. The stories stories convey huge amounts of information in really nice, succinct parcels.
Yeah.
You know, the one I talk about with cycling up Mont Ventoux, for example. I know
Yeah.
that's one that when I see a lot of those, particularly for salespeople, those light bulbs,
Yeah.
or leaders, that those light bulbs go off.
Yeah.
And that's the best part of my job, right? When you're on stage, there's 2,000 people, and as you're scanning through, people go, "Oh, that's got it. Yep, that's it. I get. It makes sense to me." And so it's that is awesome, but what they do next matters, and so giving them tools is important.
Tell that story, because that's a cracking story.
Yeah, okay, cool. So we've already uncovered that I'm a sad middle-aged man in Lycra, so we don't have to run over that again. But I was in France, and if you're like anyone who loves cycling knows that Mont Ventoux is like the granddaddy of the Tour de France mountains. It's different from the other mountains because it's not in the Alps, it's not in the Pyrenees, it's out in the middle of Provence, it's all by itself, and it's just a big monster. It's 20 Ks from the bottom of the climb to the top. Average is about, I think it's just 8.59% gradient. So if you're in Sydney, it's like Heartbreak Hill, but steeper, times 6. That's sort of what we're looking at in terms of cycling. So it's particularly hard for two other features. It's got really long stretches where you can see right up the road. And like you go, cool, for the next 2 Ks, there is no break, there's no change. It's whatever I'm doing right now. Sit into it and get used to it. And then at the top, there's no trees, so it's windswept, it's hot, it's a cool thing to do if you're a cyclist.
Not selling it for me.
He's just about to take his bike back.
So I get to the top. It's like 2 hours it took me to get up there. And, of course, I had my GoPro and I had my Garmin and I had to put it on Strava. I had to upload the data because I'm a sad little man who needs to compete with everyone who doesn't really compete with me. But, you have to do all these things. And when I got back, we went back to our little Airbnb and had some wine, and I was looking at uploading the data and having a look at it. And as I was doing that, something struck me. My data was completely unremarkable. Like there was nothing in there that was exciting. My heart rate was fine. Nothing stupid happened. I was, thousands of people do this ride every year. I was sort of in the 40%, 30% rate. It wasn't particularly fast, wasn't particularly slow. Average, run of the mill. Nothing to see here.
Yeah.
And what struck me about that was that's not how I felt.
Yeah.
For me, this was awesome. This was something I'd thought about for years. I'd seen it on TV. I'd seen people cycling on TV. I'd gotten to France. I'd hired the bike. I'd had the gear. Like it was 2 hours of suffering to get to that top and get the photos and, all that sort of stuff. The feeling there was amazing, and none of that sat in the data.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at my data and everyone else's, you'd look straight past it. And, the number of people I talk to, salespeople, businesses, I go, how do you know what your customers love? Or we run a survey, we get data. Or it's all data crunching. I'm like, okay, cool, but that's not necessarily what's valuable. That's not what's important. What really matters to people. And if you don't know what really matters to people, what are you doing? Like you're missing the most important part of that ride. So those sorts of stories allow people to go, okay, I get that concept. Like, how many times have you heard someone say, it's not all about the data, or, there's so much more meaning, and we'll use all these phrases and terms. People go, yeah. But it doesn't really, I think stories sometimes help it sink in. You go, right, I get what you mean by that. Because you can relate. You can go, okay, maybe you don't want to ride up the mountain, which is disappointing.
No, I've already got something I can relate to, around racetracks and stuff like that, where I thought I was having a blistering lap time, come back and I'm just average. Just an average man. Or even on a motorbike, where I had photographers taking photos of me going around corners and stuff like that, and I'm like, man, I am nailing this corner.
Yeah.
Then I checked the photo, I was like, man, my posture is all wrong. What's my leg doing there? What am I doing here? That was like, I'm nowhere near the ground. What's going on?
Yeah.
But in my mind, I was having the greatest time of my life. Yeah.
But and the data can be really good to help us correct things, to help us interrogate what's going on. I'm not suggesting that we throw it away.
Yeah.
But it's just not everything, is it?
Yeah.
Experience is
The part you can't see. Yeah.
Well, the data gives us the outcome, doesn't it? So the data is actually there to go, well, that's what has happened. So this salesperson has made 100 calls today.
Yeah.
It doesn't show the
quality of
the prep. It doesn't show the quality. It doesn't show what the conversation has been. What's the outcome of that conversation been? It just shows the number of calls.
Absolutely.
You'd be the same with hours spent restoring your cars and things
Yeah.
like that. It doesn't show everything else. Okay, well, actually, we can't get that part, so we've got to get that in.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting space to play in, and it's maybe we're kind of getting to this space because there's a lot more people that are now doing with user experience. So they're being hired and employed by companies to make sure that their user experience for their customers is optimum. So maybe we are starting to think about, okay, yes, we can save you money, but how does it feel to use us?
Yeah.
How does it look to use us? And would you use us again?
And experience gets us back. A big part of human-centered design and user experience testing and that sort of stuff is empathy.
Yeah.
What does that feel like? And asking those questions. You've got to be really careful when you do surveys. 'Cause people just tell you what you want to hear, and you don't. You lead the witness, right? You ask them specific questions. You've got to be careful in groups. The old focus groups.
Yeah.
People aren't very truthful in focus groups. You're in a social situation with strangers, so you immediately feel uncomfortable. And sometimes people will speak up, but often it'll be an edge of a personality rather than the middle that speaks up really loud. Focus groups are challenging, and actually being able to sit with someone and watch them. And some of the banks have got labs now where they'll bring a customer in and go, just use the website. And they'll watch them and they'll video it, and they'll try to not interact with them as much as possible to let that person have an experience and just see it, observe it, and don't influence it, don't poke in it too much.
And that's why
Yeah.
a lot of the shops, they have the atmospherics in shops, whether it's you've got carpet to slow people down, tiling to make people go quicker. So if you look at some of the department stores, they'll have tiling or lino, whatever the like a shiny surface, and that helps people navigate through the store.
Yep.
But when they want you to slow down and look at clothes and browse, it's carpet because it feels more comfortable.
Yep.
They'll have different music playing. They'll have different scents playing, scents in various parts of the store.
Yep.
Even in the UK, I'm pretty sure. Well, it's different here because you don't do booze in your supermarkets. But in the UK, the alcohol aisle is more dimly lit, and it's at the end. So if you go to a supermarket,
The
you
dodgy end.
you go left to right.
Yep.
Naturally, right? Because that's the way you go. Fresh fruit's always at the front,
Yep.
and in the UK, the booze is always at the back.
Yeah.
And it's more dimly lit because that's the more expensive items in the shop. But
And-
also, you've got to navigate all your way through.
It's funny because if you ask the logical question, you would never put bakery and fruit and veg is always first.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're like me, but you're like, now I'm putting soft
Yeah.
fruit
right
and
at the bottom.
vegetable bread at the bottom of my basket. That's annoying.
Yeah.
So why do they do it? They do it because it feels like you're at a marketplace. They're all
It makes
low
sense,
shelves and it feels more, it gets people into the habit of shopping, and there's so much research that goes into shopping centres.
Yeah.
The meat aisle is just after the fruit and veg. So now I'm buying cold stuff. I'm going to have to drag it through the rest of the shopping centre. It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, but it's about your experience. Right, and all these things matter, but getting back to where does it matter? It doesn't necessarily matter for your conscious brain. It doesn't even notice that stuff.
So why invest so much money in it?
Because your subconscious does.
Subconscious does.
Your subconscious picks it all up. You've done this. You've been sitting with someone. They've got their arms crossed, and you look down and go,
Mirroring.
"Oh shit, I got my arms crossed."
Yeah.
And then you try and do something different. And you feel weird because you're forcing yourself to sit some way that they're not. And this is part of the subconscious is going, I'm with someone, I want to build a social connection. People feel more comfortable when they're being acting like they are. People change their tone of voice. People do all sorts of things subconsciously. So, there's lots of interesting research on this sort of stuff. But I'd say if you want to get good at empathy, start looking at yourself and going, why do you do what you do? Why do you why do you make choices that you do? I was reflecting on the way here that when we were talking about Ferraris and expensive watches and handbags and all these sorts of things, why do people buy them? Well, don't ask them why, because they'll tell you things that aren't necessarily true. Would be most of the time, not always, but a lot of it is probably. If you look at evolutionary biology, would say it's a way of showing that you have excess resources. It's a way of showing off. It's your peacock feathers, right?
Yeah.
So, peacocks have a ridiculous bloom of feathers that makes them highly attractive to predators, slow to move, and they can't fly anymore. Like that's a ridiculous thing to have. But what it signals to the peahen is, I am so good that I can build this thing and still survive.
You are welcome.
That's right. How good am I? And, often buying a really expensive car or boat or watch is a way of saying, I've got that much resources.
Flex.
I can drop it on. I can drop a couple of $100,000 on this bad boy, and not have to eat baked beans. Well done, me.
Come see me.
That's right. And look, I'm not suggesting. Sometimes people go, "Oh, no, that's not the reason." They get offended. I'm not saying it's bad. Welcome to the game of life. Right? We're all in this together. Happens everywhere. There's a guy in Mumbai who built. He has the most expensive house in the world. Have you seen this?
No.
Ambani, I think his name is.
This is Barry's mate.
It might be. No, in the middle of Mumbai. So I was there many years ago. It was just being built. It's 52 stories.
It's another Taj Mahal, sort of.
It's got a living garden hanging down most of the sides. It's got 2 helipads. I think about 20 floors of it is just parking.
What?
And it's in the middle of Mumbai, which is, if you've been to one of the most crowded cities, has some of the biggest slums in the world, right next door.
It's obnoxious.
It is, but culturally, it's interesting because I was like, if someone did that in Australia, no one is buying their stuff ever again.
Yeah,
right? We're going to burn it down.
Yeah.
There, people go, I want to be like that.
Yeah, well, it's aspirational.
I could be like that one day too.
Yeah.
So there's different culture, different context, different beliefs. I'm not suggesting it's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just we need to ask the question more rather than it's obnoxious. That's our judgment based on our beliefs. Cool, good for you. That's a judgment, but having the ability to flex outside of that and go, well, what else could it be? What else could it be? What else might be true? And understanding it more, that puts you in the box seat, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's sales or leadership, now you got more information.
And hopefully we're now, and going back to kind of current state where I think we've now got the time to start looking at that other layer.
Yeah.
Taking the time to understand a bit more about why people do stuff or where you go, how you do things.
What they need.
Exactly right. So hopefully we are starting to kind of get there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, old habits die hard.
Yeah.
And
well, it's just they're easy to go back into, aren't they?
And easy to default.
Yeah.
Your brain wants to, particularly under stress, right? So under stress and pressure, your brain defaults back to, what it knows best, what's worked in the past. And so this is, the whole reason I wrote that kids book is that we do this problem, right? So it's called The Monkey and the Rhino. I'll tell you the story. I haven't got we should have brought it for a little read here, but
we can both read. It's okay.
Okay, good. So there's a monkey and a
Wait,
rhino.
it's not a pop-up.
It's a good idea, though.
I'll get you one for your birthday.
We'll get it, we'll add some flash in there too. Add some blink. No, so there was a monkey and a rhino that lived around this tree. And they had a good partnership. So the monkey climbed to the top of the tree, ate picked the youngest leaves. They were the rhino's favourite, right? And the rhino would chase off the lions when they'd come around to hassle the monkey. Good partnership going on. Anyway, one day it rains and then it hails, and it hadn't hailed before. And the hail belts down, and after the hail's passed, the monkey's battered and bruised, and he's laying there, and he says to the rhino, "Oh, are you okay after that storm?" And the rhino says, "Yeah, I'm okay." The monkey said, "Well, hang on, I'm really hurt. How come you're okay? What have I got to do? How come you're fine? What's going on here?" He said, "Well," the rhino said, "I'm big and tough, and I've got thick skin. You just got to toughen up and get thick skin like me." So the monkey thinks about it. He goes off and finds some mud and clay and puts it on his arms, his legs and body, and bakes himself in the sun, right, trying to get this thick skin. And the rhino's a bit annoyed because he can't climb the tree anymore. Right? He's stiff, but he thinks he's going to be okay. And next storm rolls in. Rain comes down, washes off the mud and the clay. Hail comes down, same result. Poor monkey's battered and bruised. Says to the rhino, "These storms are killing me. What am I going to do?" The rhino says, "Simple, you just got to toughen up, get a thick skin. What's the problem?" So he's a bit dejected now, our poor little monkey. He goes and he sits in the tree, and as he's sitting there, a squirrel pops out of a little hole in the tree. And so the monkey says to the squirrel, "Hey, are you okay after that storm?" The squirrel says, "Yeah, I'm okay, I'm fine." Like he goes, but do you have thick skin? It doesn't look like you got thick skin. Squirrel says, monkey, we can't all have thick skin. It doesn't work that way. See, I'm small and I can hide in this little hole. You've got to find your way to get through. And they have a bit of a chat, and in the book he goes on a little bit of an adventure, and it's fun, riveting. But afterwards he works it out. And as the next storm's rolling, he walks over and he sits underneath the belly of his friend the rhino and waits out the storm. And see, the reason I wrote the book is I was talking to people, particularly in corporate, about this term resilience kept popping up. It's been around, now more than ever, but it's not new. We've been talking about it for years now. And we need more resilient people. People need to be more resilient. And what I saw was that was code for people just need to toughen up. People just need to toughen up like me. And that doesn't work for everyone, right? People got to find their own way. And companies are going, okay, we need to be more diverse. We need more gender bias. We need more, we need more diversity of culture and race and all these different measures. And I'm all for that. I think there is absolutely no doubt that diversity provides a huge opportunity for businesses when done well, when it's actually inclusive and built in. Too much of it is let's bring the creative people in. Okay, we'll get them to be creative. Okay, welcome. We needed more creativity in our business now. You sit here. You have to sit there. There's no stand-up desks. And no, you can't have an Apple. We don't run Apple Macs here. And no, there won't be any bright colours. You'll need to wear a suit and tie, and we come in at 9 and we leave at 5, and we all go to the pub on a Friday night, so you should join us if you want to be in the crew. And then those people struggle to perform, and we go, they just couldn't tough it out. They just bad cultural fit. We sort of blame them like it's their fault. We brought them in and made the conditions so anti what they are used to, so uninclusive and incongruent with what was needed, and then they failed and we blame them for it. Madness.
Can you not, just to flip that though, could you not look at it, and I agree with what you said, by the way, where the monkey, I love this analogy, actually learnt and developed skills to go kind of use his brain and went, hang on a minute, he spoke to other people, and then he went, I've got to hide under the rhino. So without telling people to toughen up, is there then still the piece where people can still learn? So actually, while you're trying to be tough, let's just, an inverted commas, it's encouraging you to use your resources and actually learn from others to say, well, how have you done things? How should I be doing it? And why aren't you feeling the same thing? So does it open up a conversation?
Absolutely.
As well?
And so the leader needs to be like the squirrel. Needs to be aware that they have a way they get by, but that doesn't work for everyone. Yeah,
not everyone's got thick skin.
But they've got to be prepared to go, okay, let's have a conversation about it.
Inspiring curiosity in others.
Absolutely, and asking the questions and going, what
I got
else?
that from you, by the way.
Yeah. I did note it. I can tell because you looked at me with that. Hey. No, but it's absolutely true. Don't advice. Oh man, we give it out so quickly, right? Oh, what you should do is, and tell me, no one likes hearing that ever, right? When your mum or dad goes, well, what you should do involves you. No one likes hearing that.
Yeah, of course.
Because you're not them. Back to this problem, right? And so right now you're going to have, people are going to be starting to go, I can't wait to go back to the office, right? John, no, you can't. Want to be back in the office, love working from the office. Cool. Then there's going to be people going, I am loving working from home. Yep. I never want to go back. Yep. There's going to be people going, I want to go back, but I'm terrified of catching the train in or the bus. There's going to be people saying, I'm really not comfortable with working from home, but I know I should probably do it. You're just going to have this massive sea of different responses that people are going to have. And what lots of companies will want to do is go, we need one policy that rules them all, and everyone has to fit in. And just expect, you can do it, and it's easy, just expect that it's just not going to work for everyone. And it'll bias towards some people, and the reason we have gender inequality in our workplaces is because the way we'd set up work was, hard for women to access for a whole, period of time for a whole bunch of reasons. And if we want to change it, we need to be conscious of those things and start asking more questions, finding new ways.
There was also, I was talking to a colleague the other day, and they they were kind of sitting on the fence about moving back into the office. I think they've done okay at home. They're quite happy, but they also like being in the office. And one of their observations were, well, if people are going to go back into the office and they wanted to stay at home, how is that going to be managed? And actually, the concern was around the kind of around the coffee machine chats, or around the lunch break chats, or the printer chats, where you normally have those chats with your colleagues, and they were going to miss out on that. And that's kind of where some decisions get made and ideas come about, and they were going to miss out on that, and they were worried about that. And how was the leader or the manager of that team going to make sure that if you do have, let's say, 50-50 split of people in the office and 50% working from home, how do you keep everyone engaged? Because that's doubly hard.
It is, but it's already a problem. Like, you've got people who work, 3-4 days a week, and I've seen this where, teams will go, okay, we all go for Thursday afternoon after 5 o'clock, the Thursday drinks, Friday drinks, and there's people who go, well, I've got kids, so I'm out of that, and then lots of bonding and stuff happens at that event, and you're excluding someone.
Yeah.
A lot of people go, all right, well, maybe it's that person's problem. Maybe they should prioritise work. I don't think that's the case. A lot of people go, well, maybe it's the work's problem. They've got a policy or something. They need to change a policy. I would go, it's the leader and the team. And I think it's the team's responsibility to go, if we're going to be a team, we can't be excluding people.
Make sure everyone can have a seat at the table.
And the leader is the custodian of that team. They're the shepherd who should be going, guys, we can't be doing that. That's just not going to fit everyone in. And I want everyone to be in. You can't build a good team where you're just hanging people out to dry every now and then, because you just create, these factions within.
I think on your point where you said, walking to the water fountain or something like that, that opportunity for discourse is not going to be there. I think it might have an opposite reaction as well, that people know that interaction might not happen, so they'll book a schedule or book a conversation to have with that person, because they know that opportunity might not come past. Or even if that does come past, they might not have the courage to be able to do it, so that they need that. So they need to be able to say, what, I'm going to book a half an hour, let me have a chat to you.
Yeah, and a couple of things that giving, like tips I've been giving on this. More interaction. So if you are working from home and you've got teams that are all sitting at home, have more calls with them. Ask more questions. Sometimes we get into this habit, and I get why. We've all been in meetings that just seem to drag on, and
the same question is so relevant. Like it's
a 15-minute meeting turns into an hour because someone booked it for an hour, and we sort of go through these cycles. So because of that, we try and schedule every finite detail of a meeting and say the meeting's got to have an agenda and there's got to be points and we're going to have timing and we're going to bell and there's people do all these sorts of things, right? Yeah, cool. So we've gone that way. The problem is we've squeezed out all the time for relationship and exploration,
creativity.
Yeah. Watch the best interviewers. Andrew Denton's one of my favourites. He asks a question and then he shuts up and listens, and he doesn't fill the next space. There's any next empty space, he leaves it. In that space, the person goes, oh, and they answer more. Listen to Joe Rogan, and he talks about how he went from, he openly admits, I had no idea how to ask questions, but when I first started the podcast, I just used to keep talking and say stuff and try and be funny. And now he one of the things you'll hear him say a lot is, well, how so?
Yeah.
Which is just go deeper. Tell me more.
Yeah.
And again,
I've noticed that, yeah.
And if you're a leader, you're sitting in a meeting, you've got people going, well, I think we should do this. Okay, how come? Why do you think that? Well, let's unpack them a bit more and spend more time. People go, well, the meetings take too long. They do the first time, but you save the 5 other meetings that you have to clarify the stuff you didn't get in the first meeting you should have. Or you get those chain emails trying to clarify. Do my head in. Right? Invest the time in getting understanding so you don't have to keep chasing your tail.
Yeah.
It's, again, easier to take the tangible side, put the minutes in, schedule it all out.
Have the email chain.
Yep.
She said, he said, they said. I copied that person in, copied in my manager because I needed some backup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A CEO I worked with, he had email issues. We made 2 changes. He made 2 changes that made a huge difference. One, he said to his team, if I'm CC'd, I delete it.
Nice.
I'm not here to keep copies of your emails. So if it's not for me, I'm not reading it. If it's for me, send it to me.
Yeah.
He said, but also I only check my emails at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. and it's never open in the times between.
Wow.
His team lost their minds around, oh, what if it's emergency? He said, well, if it's emergency, you'll call.
Yeah.
Right? No one sends you an email telling you your house is on fire. Right? If it's an emergency, you'll pick up the phone, you'll walk over to my desk, we'll have a conversation. But I'm not going back and forward on these emails that should be a 2-minute phone call. And I'm definitely not sitting in on your scuffle with Bob from marketing because you want an extra $20 for balloons. Like, this isn't my job. So I'm out. Saved so much time.
Yeah. Well, some people use emails as accountability.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a lack of trust in each other. Right? Good teams don't have to do that.
A friend of mine, I didn't even know you could do this on emails, right? But a friend of mine used to, she worked in recruitment, and she used to send out an email at like 5:30 or 6 p.m. on a Friday night to all her candidates, and it would copy in her boss and stuff. But she could program it.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
I didn't know you could do that.
I do delays for the morning because people are more active.
So
He's thinking I'm going to do a delay to 5:53 so that people think I'm working late.
yeah, so the boss was like, "Oh, bravo, well done for sticking back on a Friday at 6 p.m." And she's down the pub,
Yeah.
having a few beers,
Cracker.
and then would go, "Done, right, my round."
Yeah, right. See, I use it for I delay it till the morning. So I write out some of the emails of my agenda for the next day, or some goals that we need for the next day. But I send it to them in the morning.
Right,
So when
okay.
they come in, people are usually more reactive at first thing in the morning
Yeah.
when they jump in. It's like, all right, bang, I'll get a fresh email. I'll do that straight away because they work from the top down.
Yeah.
And I suggest that's what it was designed for. But let's unpack that because a good example of you sort of see it and you can make a judgment about it quickly. If that person works in an environment, a team environment, where people value the amount of time you're at your desk, then that's a logical thing to do. Smart thing to do, really, isn't it? Because you're getting credit for stuff, like you're actually cheating the system, getting credit for stuff you're not doing. But remember, if you want to change that, you need to change. You don't change the behaviour, you change what we reward around here. Like, we should reward people who hit their targets, do everything they need to do, and finish by 3 o'clock on a Friday. Like, that should be celebrated. Good stuff. Like, killing it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're sending emails at 11:30 at night, you have poor time management.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be working. You should be able to do that during the day.
Well, and this is where you get to make choices. So, if you're going to build a team where, and let's say you wanted to have an environment in your team where everyone does like work ridiculous hours. They're slaves to their job and they're in it for a few years and then they want to make their money and leave, whatever. Then you can have that culture. That's fine. Just don't expect you can bring in lots of diverse people.
Yeah,
You're only going to get a certain breed who are going to be able to deal with that stuff.
yeah, it's true.
And so, which is fine, but you then probably only going to have a short lifespan in your business, my guess, because you're not going to have the diversity which lets you see the different opportunities and lets you keep evolving and changing and growing. And lots of businesses have this problem that they want to have a startup culture, they want to fail fast and they want to be agile, and they want to have longevity and long-term success. And lots of the insurance companies are in this problem. They've got big old businesses of car insurance and home insurance, which they need to squeeze every dollar out of, and they need to be really tightly managed and live within constraints. And they want to have a team who's innovative and doing new stuff and trying to come up with the brand new ideas, and they want to have all that under one roof. And they can't play by the same rule book, right? Fail fast works fine in startup world. You can't fail fast when you've got people's lives at risk. No. You can't fail fast in the big old businesses because any mistake costs you way too much money and blows out your numbers. So there's this sort of culture needs to fit the business. This isn't about, we want to have a nice, warm, fluffy culture and destroy all of our competitors. Okay. Or we want to have team spirit and camaraderie and collaboration, and all of our performance metrics are individual competitive metrics, and we rank our employees, and the bottom 15% get fired every year. Like companies have that, right? Some companies have, you're up or out in a lot of the consulting firms. You either get promoted or you have to leave because there's a new wave of graduates coming up under you, and you can't be holding spaces. And so you can have that system, but the culture will bend to that system. You'll get a competitive culture, which might be okay, but you've got to be conscious of these things. Instead, I see companies go, well, we're all about integrity, respect, and teamwork, and we get these awesome posters with people hugging and all the different coloured arms holding each other, and a person hanging off the side of a cliff, and it's courageous and inspirational. And we say, well, that's our culture because we've got posters. And I call bullshit. Your culture is the way people feel about work, and they don't care about the posters. Posters, all the banks had integrity before, during, and after the Royal Commission. All their posters saying integrity. Why didn't the posters save them? So you've got to be careful of policies, processes, procedures. This is where I guess my background and where I've come from, I look at how do I make sure these things marry up. This is not come in and paint the walls pink and get bean bags and think we're creative, because you've got to mesh these things with strategy and the way the business, it's got to be pragmatic and aligned. You've got to, I sort of think about culture as a bit like a river, right? It's fast moving, it's dynamic, it's hard to pin down, and it's powerful. And the one thing about rivers, though, is they pretty much always follow the riverbed, don't they? Mm-hmm. That riverbed is your structure, it's your policies, it's your hierarchies, it's the incentive and reward systems. Those things guide where that culture can go. And we get these poor people who get made the head of culture. And someone goes, cool, now go and change the culture. It's like you're sending this poor person into a raging river with a little bucket going, okay, move it. No, that's impossible. Yeah. Business, and this is why I work with leaders, this is why I don't work just with HR people or just with marketing, but I work with business leaders who need to think about how does all this stuff fit together. This stuff can't be in isolation.
Out of interest, when you do your sessions, let's say for Company X, what's the who's in the room? I mean, are we talking just C-suites? Are we talking senior managers? Are we talking people that have been in the business a long time? Do you get a mix of people? Like, who do you maybe for the business to get the best value out of you and vice versa? Because you don't want to work with people that don't want to change or that aren't interested or are arrogant enough to go, we're fine.
Yeah.
Who's like your ideal mix of a hierarchy, if we can call it that, in the room?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love working with leadership teams. So often what happens is a business owner or a CEO sort of goes, I know that stuff's important, I'm trying to work on it, and they want to be a visionary, like they want to expand into Asia, they want to build new products. These CEOs or business owners who are wanting to, be that type of leader, and they're stuck with emails. They're refereeing battles between their C-suite, their direct reports, and they're struggling with all these people issues, and they want to get on top of that. And so often they'll come to me and say, I want to help my leadership team lift their capability. And we're not talking about just emotional intelligence. We're not talking about just communication. We're talking about let's review your strategy and the way things work here, and understand and give everyone that sense of understanding of you need to manage both these worlds constantly. You always need to be thinking about it. You need to be designing. If you're going to have a values and a culture that you're going to design, that can't be HR can't do it. The HR person can't do that in isolation of everyone else. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense. Yeah, everyone's got to be in the room. A big one is they'll say, "Oh, my sales team and my operations team just don't get along." right? They blame each other for every problem that happens. They're constantly at each other's throats. And often what I'll find there is the manager or the leader of each team inside their group have an awesome culture. And what happens is it's a bit like, think of like the football teams in Europe, like Everton and Liverpool. They're strong because they hate each other. And they're stronger, but the deeper that hate, the stronger their internal bonds become, right? And this is what happens in businesses. The sales team, the head of sales goes, I'm going to rally my troops by telling them that those operations idiots keep stuffing up everything, it's their fault. And you actually having a common enemy is a great way of forming a strong bond inside a team. The problem is I say to them, let's just take a step back. You're on the same team. Mm-hmm. You're two parts of the same team. This is like, your arms are ganging up on your legs here and you're fighting. It's just dumb. And actually the whole machine you can't be successful without them being successful. And we start to build that's a strategy conversation. That's not an emotional intelligence conversation. And it has to be then embedded in, okay, well, how do we change the systems and processes so we get a better culture result? And then how do we manage that? How do we look for signals that there's things wrong in the culture, in the conversations? How do we improve the relationships? As a company, I really admire Zappos, and one of the particular things they do, they love this idea that everyone should collaborate and know each other. And they've got quite a number of people they're based in Las Vegas, and they have a system that books meetings randomly between two different people across the whole business constantly. So just booking meetings, and these people are told to go and turn up. You have to turn up to them. And so, George from marketing gets told to go and see Jeff from warehousing. And they meet up and have a coffee. They have to go. And a lot of people would go, well, that doesn't make sense. They don't need to talk to it. They don't need to build that understanding. But guess what happens when someone in warehousing goes, there's a marketing issue. Jeff goes,
I think that's a great idea.
I'll just give George a call. I talked to him the other day.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic.
That's a great idea.
So the understanding you build, you invest some time in the understanding, makes that agility so much better, right? Yeah.
But then also we've spoken a lot about culture today. We've spoken a lot about leadership. We've spoken a lot about just basic communication, right? That then bridges all of that because you're forming relationships with people that if you're in a company that has 30,000 staff, your paths might never cross. But if you can then have a coffee with your colleague, you know who they are, face to the name. You can build a relationship. You probably shared some personal stuff as well. You probably know they got maybe married, kids, where they live, maybe some other things. Their football team. That's the foundations of a relationship.
Absolutely. And so this is where I go. If you want that, and undeniably we all do. Like when I used to work for CommBank, Sir Ralph Norris now. Was a CEO. When you get in the lift with him, always say hello. Second time, he knew your name. How are things going? And you'd see he wanted a culture where that's what we did. The problem is he wasn't in the lift enough.
Yeah,
he was only in there once every so often, right?
Yeah.
The majority of my experience was walking in the lift and everyone looking at their phones.
Yeah.
The culture is the majority experience, not the individuals. Right?
Do that in the lifts now. It freaks people out. If you stand in the lift, it doesn't have to be in your workplace, and you just acknowledge them and go, "Hi, how are you?" They generally don't know what's going on.
Talk on the tube.
They're just not too sure. Yeah. I remember I went back to the UK a few years ago, and I commuted into our London office, and it was probably about 45 minutes every day, and I was probably fortunate enough where I was early enough on the line to get a seat with my ticket, right, and commuting on the train was like a novelty for me, so I would have looked like a nutter because I was just smiling. And I was
you're the weirdo on the train.
I was greeting people morning. I was greeting people. I really enjoyed it, but I'll be honest. By the end of the week, I was over it. Yeah. But the novelty as well. But it's funny when you just acknowledge, and I sometimes do it as well. If I'm in a particularly good mood, walking into work, I'll make sure that I catch someone's eye and I'll smile at them.
In the salmon jacket.
And it's amazing, not always.
Signals.
It's amazing how uncomfortable people feel now getting a smile.
Cool. So, and this is the subconscious culture things that we're talking about, right? So culture is the way we do things around here. Your conscious brain doesn't run that game very often. It's your subconscious. You know, when you walk in a room, what does it feel like? That's subconscious. That's not conscious. You know, when you go, something's not up.
Yeah.
That's your subconscious going, hey, dude, something's not up. We don't know what it is. Can't explain it, but there's something that I'm seeing, feeling, experiencing. So that the challenge we've got is if you want to change culture, you have to do things. There has to be experience that people have often. I do this exercise, and anyone can do this really with their teams. I call it rituals and beliefs. So every human civilization that's had success over the last 10,000 years had a set of beliefs that held them together. And that might have been mythical, it might have been spiritual, it might have been religious, whatever, right? But they have a set of beliefs. What they also have is rituals that reinforce the beliefs. Dances, songs, practices like Lent and Mass and Ramadan, and all these different they're rituals to reinforce the set of beliefs, yeah? Mm-hmm. We do that in businesses too. So I'll do this activity where I'll have 3 columns. The first one I'll say, these are your rituals. Tell me, for your team, what are the big drivers of what you do each day? Or what influences on you heavily in terms of your daily daily routines? And I did this with the sales team, so it might relate to some of your team, John. They said commission. Yeah, cool, okay. Commission has a big shadow. Sales targets, great. They said our sales meeting is really big. I said, okay, tell me about that. Well, we sit around a room and the boss basically takes down our numbers and how we're going and gives us a bit of a push if we need to. It's, okay, good. What else? Prospecting. I said, okay, tell me, what does that look like? And they said, well, we work with small businesses, so we just mine databases looking for small businesses that aren't loaded on our system. We load them and flag them so no one else can touch them. Okay, cool. So you're building your prospect list. And that might not sound uncommon. I'll go, okay, so that's the first column, those are your rituals. Second column, I want you to tell me what each of those rituals feel like. What's the experience you have with it? What does it feel like? Which is a bit nebulous and abstract, right? Okay, commission, what's that feel? Well, it's all about individual performance and money. Reward, individual reward, cool. Sales targets, all about individual performance. Okay, sales meeting, it's almost competitive and about your individual performance amongst your peers.
Bit of a chest beating exercise.
Yeah. And prospecting, well, it's about making sure you've got your own pipeline. It's very individualistic and it's pretty competitive, making sure you've got enough in your kit bag to get you through. Okay, great. So we've got that middle column, all individualistic performance. Blah, blah, blah. Third column, beliefs. What are the values that you write on the wall? What are the things that you say you are as a team? What do you write? What's on your website copy around your mission, vision, stuff like that? Yeah. Teamwork, collaboration, customer centricity, it's not a big list. If you go around Australia's businesses, that list is not particularly different for a lot of them. And as I say to them, I go, okay, let's break this down. The middle column is your actual values. They're the actual values that you live and breathe every day. Individualism, competitiveness, trying to beat each other, chest beating. The beliefs column is your aspirational values. That's what you might want to be one day. But if these two things aren't even close, and this is all teamwork and this is all individualism, then you got some problems. So the exercise, as we do that, we then say, okay, cool. So my first question is, do you really want to be those things on the end? Do you really want teamwork, collaborate? You don't have to. Just because some marketing person or HR person said it was a good idea, it doesn't have to be. Do you. Whatever that is, pick what you want to be. And you maybe want to be individualistic and competitive. Okay, that's fine, but own it, would be my suggestion. But if you don't, if you do want those things, cool. What we need to do is make sure we change the first column so the second column aligns. How do we change those rituals so that those experiences align with these different things? And one of the suggested changes was so simple. We said, okay, let's make commission. Your commission now is going to be broken up into 70% is just your performance. That's it. 70% is on you. 30% is based on team performance, and that's locked, and you can only unlock it when the team hits a minimum threshold. Team doesn't hit this threshold, that's locked away. So what do you think happened in the next sales meeting? People are saying, oh, hang on, how are you going, John? All right. And you guys are a bit like, well,
Can I help you with that?
Yeah, actually, I did some prospecting, and you're really good with these sorts of customers. I actually flagged a bunch of those. How about I give you some of those? You pick them up, and then I'll take some of the others.
Wow,
What are we starting to get? Teamwork and collaboration.
Yeah.
brilliant.
So, but you can't move the culture without moving. You can't change the river without the riverbed, right? You need to make sure these things line up, and so you can't do emotional intelligence and empathy and culture out in isolation of strategy and process and procedure and operating model. And you know, that's what I love doing. I love playing in that space.
Yeah.
You know, actually, these things don't. It's not one or the other. It's both. And it's about aligning them, right? So if you want to be individualistic and competitive, go nuts. You know, and there might be problems with that, but don't say you're going to, like, the Banking Royal Commission, the bank that came out, the big bank that probably came out the best, was probably a bit surprising. It was Macquarie Bank. And beforehand, some people might have gone, Macquarie Bank, they're going to have some, you know, skeletons in the closet. Surely they're going to have done some bad things, because they weren't necessarily saying all of those things that other banks, you know, all the signalling that the others did. The thing is, they were exactly what they said on the tin. Yes, we are competitive. Yes, we push hard. We are. They've got a term they use. I think maybe they still do, but they did previously. It was exploration within boundaries. Like, push as hard as you can, but here's the bumpers.
Yeah.
Don't go outside them.
Yeah.
And they were clear on this is how the culture works. And that's sort of helped them through that period, whereas the other bank said integrity and customer satisfaction and world-leading service organisation. And people went, yeah, that's all crap, right?
Yeah.
And when push came to shove, they didn't use any of that in their decision-making.
Mind blown. Mind blown. Dan, I think we're going to wrap it up here, mate.
All right, mate?
How can we get hold of you? Where's your handles?
Yep.
Are you on Instagram, LinkedIn,
Yep,
MySpace,
absolutely.
Twitter, Flickr? Have you got a TikTok account yet?
I don't have a TikTok.
No? How can people reach out, get in contact?
Easiest, LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. Daniel Murray, Empathic Consulting. You'll find me there. My websites, I've got empathicconsulting.com.au and danielmurrayspeaker.com is my speaker site. Lots of videos, free resources on there, like white papers where we sort of take these concepts and go deeper.
Love the white papers, by the way. Love the white papers. We've not even uncovered some of that stuff, so we are definitely going to be getting you back into the studio for more.
If you're going to serve the whiskey up, I'll have to come back again.
Well, maybe next time don't drive. Maybe see if we can get an Uber over. But thank you for joining us on Lifestyle Pirates.
My pleasure, guys.
It's been
Thanks
amazing
for having
having
me.
you here. We'll see you again soon. Stay safe.
Cheers, mate.